Alright folks, I'm back. I'm gonna make a kind of teaser video here, things to come. You remember my Turbo 350 and the damage that was done to it? Well, something I've seen on forums, but I haven't actually heard of anybody doing, is do 700R4 planetaries fit in place of the Turbo 350s? Now, I know the gear ratios are different, but dimensionally, are they the same? It's something that I'm going to find out. More to come on that. But instead of rebuilding this Turbo 350 for the Nova, one thing that I don't think I've ever heard of GM doing is putting a overdrive, use proper English here, transmission behind the inline 6 250 4.1 liter. So I was looking at the different items that would need to be there for that. Bracketing, as far as for the throttle valve cable, is already there because this one had a kickdown cable. So that's not an issue. Linkage on the carburetor, same deal. It's already there. The only thing that I'm thinking is going to be an issue, two things. The 700R4 is a little bit longer, so we need a shorter drive shaft. And cross member, location and mounting. So I'm going to be conducting a little experiment with the help of a friend of mine. And we are going to put said overdrive transmission behind the inline 6 to see what kind of gas mileage it gets and what kind of power it's going to have in the process. More to come. It's me again. Forgot to mention a couple of things when doing that conversion that you have to consider. One of them is the shift linkage. See this piece right down here. Oop, sorry about the sun. That goes, this C side here goes inside the frame, and then that end is what goes to the shift bracket on the transmission itself, and this here is where the rod attaches that comes down from the steering column, because mine's a column shift. Something you want to consider is this going to fit between the Turbo 350 and the 700R4? Or do we need to get one that from a vehicle that already had a 700R4 in it, because the angles might be different, the bends might be different. That's just something else you want to consider before doing the conversion. What else? Oh, something else. Torque converter. The bolt pattern as far as how it mounts to the flex plate, because it's an automatic. Flex plates get automatic. Sticks have a flywheel. A lot of people mess that up. Bolt pattern is exactly the same. Walk over here to the transmission. The bell housing bolt pattern, as you can see, these here, are identical, because on the inline 6 it has the exact same bolt pattern for the bell housing as the V8, so any one of these is going to work as long as it's not a Buick, Pontiac, or Olds engine and transmission. Those bolt patterns are different. The only exception to that one is if you get a Turbo 350 that came Turbo 350C, which is the lockup version. Most of those had the universal bolt pattern, which has both. It has this one, and it has the one for the Buick, Pontiac, and the Olds. Just things you want to think about before doing any kind of crossover. I don't know if I mentioned it. I probably did. The Speedo gear setup, that's going to be different, because this one here on the tail shaft, as you can see, let me bring this over here. Yeah, it's got this tiny little hole, it's about the size of a quarter on this Turbo 350. Now, later models had a larger hole, because on my 80 Trans Am, it had a bigger hole. Somewhere around here, I've got the Speedo driven gear and the housing that came out of that transmission. I'll find it later and then I'll show you. But these are all things to consider before attempting any kind of conversion to put it into a vehicle that was never meant to have it. So, show you more later. It's later. This one here is out of a Turbo 350 that came in my 80 Trans Am. As you can see the size difference. This one here is the one that came out of this 78 Nova. Now, I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out. This one, I think, might fit into the 700R4. It might be the same size. Now, I know on the 80, I had issues with this gear here actually being the right tooth count and everything to make sure that my speedometer read correctly. So I got a different housing. Now, if you look here, you see there are different numbers. And then you got your little mount ears right here. That particular Turbo 350 had a bracket that went around here and then bolted over here on the side. That's what held it in. These numbers are the tooth counts for this gear on this side here. So, depending on which gear you have on it, you had a different housing. What it would do is it would turn this so that it would be offset for the different gears, because of course more teeth means the gear's a little bit bigger, less teeth, a little bit smaller. Something else you need to consider is if you're going with an actual gear-driven Speedo instead of a later model where it's electronically, it's got a pickup down on side on the oh wait, that's the input shaft. Where's the tail shaft? Or no, that's the input shaft. I'm sorry. On the tail shaft, instead of right here having a nylon gear, it would have a reluctor wheel that would send a signal through an electronic pickup that would go in place of this, and that's how the Speedo is ran on the later models. Just another thing to consider before doing any transformations.